Well, both major parties officially launched their election campaigns with big announcements on housing and tax breaks. As the underdog in the campaign, Peter Dutton was insisting the coalition is ready to govern.
We are ready to govern. This is a pivotal election that will shape our future, a rise or fall moment for Australia.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister was insinuating that Peter Dutton was a Trump clone.
Our plan to build Australia's future isn't about borrowing ideologies or copying policies from anywhere else or anyone else.
Oh, anywhere else or anyone else? Who's he talking about, Danica?
Yeah, good question, James. Who would he be talking about?
If you've got something to say, come out and say it. But this dancing around the topic, and of course we'll talk about it a bit more later because Senator Price created some furor regarding a Trump statement. But for Anthony Albanese to make statements like this demonstrates just the infantile policy debate we have in this country at the moment. When we're facing massive challenges, my problem with the coalition launch was that they talk about we're ready to govern, but I think a lot of people are still asking, but what's the major difference? You're saying this is a critical election for the future of our country, and yet so many of the policies seem to be a race to match each other in spending. Yeah. Peter Dutton argues that Labor are just continually spending us into debt, and yet he's proposing to do pretty much the same thing. So it's an interesting contrast at the moment with not quite enough contrast.
No, I completely agree. I think the takeaway from both of the launches today was money, 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 James, the old ABBA song, money, money, money. Lots of it now being splashed around to woo voters. Hardly surprising, though, because, of course, pre-poll opens in a week and a half. So now is really the time to be trying to nail down those undecided voters. And we know that there are a lot of undecided voters out there this time round. But Albanese has today announced a $10 billion plan to build more than 100,000 homes. Peter Dutton was out there spruiking first home buyers a mortgage deduction scheme to the tune of $1.25 billion. So a lot of money being thrown left, right and centre. But look, what I really took away from the campaign launches today, other than the fact, of course, that Anthony Albanese, one, is obsessed with Peter Dutton. I mean, that is his main talking point. It's a very negative campaign.
Peter Dutton is Donald Trump.
Peter Dutton is Donald Trump.
Message.
It's a very negative campaign message. If he's not talking about Peter Dutton, he's obsessing with his Medicare card. That's the only two lines that he's got. And we know that the coalition, they're not going to make cuts to Medicare. I don't know how many times I have to say the same old thing. Yeah. But Anthony Albanese just loves dancing around, waving about that Medicare card. Look, I do believe that Peter Dutton did step up in the last week. And I think that we saw that at this campaign launch today. You could tell that there was better energy about him, better momentum. But the problem is, of course, is whether or not that is now going to translate to voters in the next 3 weeks of this campaign.
It's good that he stepped up 3 weeks out from the election. But, I mean, we've had 3 years of horrendous government from Labor. And so for the coalition to be trying to get some momentum so late in the campaign just beggars belief. Look, when the country's going so badly, they should be doing a lot better than they are and looking for momentum today.
It needs to be short, sharp messaging and it needs to really hone back onto the cost of living. But don't forget, the budget reply speech, the wind was taken out of that by the fact that Anthony Albanese announced the election date the next day. And that was obviously very deliberate. So really, Peter Dutton hasn't had a lot of time to sell it, but he should have been at a petrol station from day dot selling their plans to cut the fuel excise, and he waited a week to actually do that. So it's got to get back on message. Now, when you think about it, though, the vote is extremely soft right now, which means that it still could go anyway. Half of Labor's vote is soft. A third of the coalition's vote is soft. So, you know, look.
Peter Dutton had Scott Morrison in the meeting today.
And John Howard as well.
Yes, but he appeared to the quiet majority, the silent majority who got Morrison over the line.
This is true.
Clearly, Peter Dutton is hoping that those people are not being reflected in the polling and there is a dissatisfied group there who will turn the tables for him.
Yeah, because, I mean, that particular block is key. But also, I mean, we had the Sky News leaders debate on Tuesday night, and I think it was about 21% of voters in the room were undecided. So it wasn't... and that probably represents, if you look at it on a larger scale, where Australia is at right now. And we do have a Newspoll as well that is going to be coming out soon. Yeah. One thing that I do want to show the audience was a very awkward exchange at the Labor Party conference between Anthony Albanese and Tanya Plibersek. Please, have a look at this.
What was that?
Well, I'm not sure what was going on there. Was that meant to be like a hug moment? Were they meant to embrace, but then one didn't know what the embrace was meant
Albanese
to be?
loves to smear Trump, right? Trump got a better kiss from his wife. Remember that one?
That's right.
Than Albanese got from Plibersek just there. I think that reflects the awkward relationship between Anthony Albanese and his Environment Minister. And don't forget, Tanya Plibersek once boasted that she would be the Labor leader right now. If she had run, she would have beaten Anthony Albanese.
Now, I just want to point out that Newspoll has actually just dropped on the Australian in the last few minutes. I've got it up on my phone. I just want to read out some of the key points. It says that a majority of voters now expect that the May 3rd election will indeed deliver a hung parliament and a Labor minority government. So the primary vote for the coalition has now fallen to below levels recorded at the last election. And there's been a personal approval boost for Anthony Albanese. I'll just take you through some of those key figures, James. Despite the increasing expectations of a hung parliament, 2/3 want a majority government, so 32% of those polled want it to be led by Labor, and interestingly, 32% want it to be governed by the coalition. So primary support for the coalition has dropped a further point to 35%. Now, obviously, this follows a fascinating week. We've got the Trump tariffs being reversed, the public servants decision, which was reversed by the coalition. So no doubt that that's having an impact as well. So we will get the figures up properly, but I just think that is interesting. A hung parliament now seems to be, James, where it's going to be at. And with that sort of result, you could expect that, unfortunately, it looks like Labor, Greens, and a couple of Teals scattered in, which is actually a disaster for this country.
Yeah, I'm surprised that 2/3 of the people surveyed want a majority government of some kind. I would have thought it would be a lot more than 2/3 of people, because a hung parliament would be an absolute disaster. You remember when Julia Gillard did a deal with the Greens, the carbon tax that we were never going to have ended up being imposed. It didn't go well for her, didn't go well for the country, but a repeat at this stage, when the Greens are even more radical and extreme, would just be terrible for the country.
Just speaking of that, it says support for the Greens remains unchanged at 12%, but support for Pauline Hanson has lifted.
And that's where the coalition are leaking votes. They're leaking votes to right conservative parties. You've got Palmer United, you've got One Nation doing well. And so people who would normally vote Liberal seem to be dissatisfied at the lack of boldness and vision coming from the coalition, who are simply matching spending with more spending rather than addressing the major problems our country has.
But also, I clearly think it's an issue with both parties, because just having another read, it says Labor also continues to struggle with a low primary vote, which remains at 33% for the third successive poll, and consistent with the party's last election. That's the lowest for the ALP since the Great Depression. So you can see why now it really is that hung parliament. Voters are clearly dissatisfied. They're completely disillusioned with both of the major parties. Look, there's still 3 weeks to go, but more to the point, as I said earlier, in 1.5 weeks, that pre-poll does open. So now is the time to try and get those undecided voters across the line, James. So.
And I can't see today's campaign launches doing much to change those opinions.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's still 3 weeks to go in the campaign. Let's just see where the momentum builds. But